The Borderlands movie situation is even worse than we thought. Josh Brown, me and you suffered through this thing the other day. People can go watch our full spoiler reaction review breakdown of the movie, quote unquote, as it is right now in cinemas. However, the history of the Borderlands movie is a fascinating thing to break down, and there's a lot to this that I want to get to. So we'll kind of just get through all this stuff because of the making of how this thing arrived in cinemas, the amount of people that worked on it, etc. I think we'll go down in media history as just one of the weirdest handled projects in quite some time. So the Borderlands movie was initially announced in August 2015, but across the last 9 years, the idea of a Borderlands movie went through 10 different writers and multiple complete overhauls, with Chernobyl and The Last of Us' Craig Mazin taking his name off the project last year in 2023, and notable figures like Sam Levinson also once being involved as well. Various reporters have mentioned that back across the mid-2010s, the script was the hottest thing in Hollywood. This is way before Mazin was on board. But director Eli Roth would refer to the movie as his Star Wars in 2021, very much thinking that it was going to lead to bigger things. The 2010 hype does make sense, though, for back then. Entertainment Weekly reported that Borderlands developer Randy Pitchford first suggested the idea in 2011, the idea of a Borderlands movie. Just before 2012's Borderlands 2 then blew the F up. That's still regarded as the best installment in the whole series, at least as far as I'm concerned. 2014 then saw Borderlands the pre-sequel and Telltale's Tales from the Borderlands, expanding the narrative potential of the IP, making it the perfect time to cross over to film. And it was this excitement around the IP, also fresh off Guardians of the Galaxy in 2014, that assumedly led to so many big names being attracted to the project and being attached over time. I'll pass this over to you in a sec because there are so many things here, but I just want to lay the table. It's back in 2015, the lead up to that, you've got all these different releases, all this different media sphere, this idea of if you could just cash in on the Guardians energy with the Borderlands IP, you would do really well. So back then, Lionsgate were in talks to get Saw and the Invisible Man director Lee Winnell to direct it, but he dropped out somewhere around the time of the announcement itself. 2016 then saw an R-rated version of the entire movie, the script, from G.I. Joe's Aaron Berg, before another version was done in 2018 by Mortal Kombat Rebirth's Oren Uziel. None of these were accepted or gained enough traction. And I think because Borderlands 3 was in development hell for years and wouldn't be announced until 2019, so you do have that whole chunk in between the pre-sequel and Borderlands 3 as a 5-year gap where it seemed like Gearbox just didn't know what they were doing. And there were various things going on with Randy Pitchford himself, the head of Gearbox, various allegations, various stories coming out about him. So it seems like the idea of a Borderlands movie was largely shelved for a bit, but none of these scripts could get over the finish line. I'll cut back to the 2020s and things like that, but thoughts on the whole thing?
I'm kind of rattled that Sam Levinson was once attached. I knew about Craig Mazin, but I had no idea of that connection, and that's just sort of sent me through a loop. That's just been going through my mind. I haven't even heard whatever the hell else
the Idol's own
talking about. That is absolutely crazy. It kind of doesn't surprise me. I don't think Borderlands' development in this regard is necessarily unique. Like, it's bad, don't get me wrong, but I look at other video game adaptations that either eventually did arrive or didn't arrive at all, and it's a similar story, right? I mean, Uncharted was in development for so long that famously Mark Wahlberg went from playing Nathan Drake to being old enough to playing Sully, and we got Tom Holland in. So the fact that this went through multiple different writers, multiple different directors, not a surprise, but it is such a huge shame. And it for me, it just brings me back to that core idea that I have, that Hollywood makes a mistake with these projects because they can never seem to find someone who actually wants to make this adaptation, like who is passionate about the games enough to get it over the finish line. Or if they do find someone passionate enough to do that, they end up parting ways with them over creative differences because they have a different idea of what they want the movie to be and how they want to adapt it. In this case, obviously taking a mature rated series and making it as broadly appealing as possible, and going even further in making it more targeted towards a kid-friendly audience. So this is a tumultuous production, but why can't studios just get these video game adaptations right? Why can't they just find someone who's passionate about that source material and just say, you know what, you might know better than us on this one. Maybe we don't know what we're talking about.
The thing that we said coming out of the movie, one of the first things you said is that you weren't expecting the movie that's out now to be a kid's film, to be geared so much towards a younger audience. And it is insane to think that they did have an R-rated version of this back in 2016. Like, the idea of what a Borderlands movie should be or could be or whatever is always going to skew more towards over-the-top gore, something even more like The Boys or something in regards to its ridiculous portrayal of over-the-top gore and comic book violence. And to walk that back multiple times over the years to the version that we have now, which is just the most sanded off product of a thing, where even in the movie itself, and again we go into this in the other video, you can see scenes that are being cut short. There's not a drop of blood in the thing, even though a lot of people are being shot and things like that. So you have all that stuff happens across the mid 2010s all the way through to about 2019, 2020. And then the 2020s is where Craig Mazin comes in. And the majority of what you can see today in cinemas right now was actually filmed in 2021 using the bones of his script from 2020. But between those years and now, even more changes happened. Scenes were reshot or added. Director Eli Roth and 2 more writers overhauled Mazin's script, and that was what led to him leaving the project. But they did bring in Deadpool's Tim Miller to replace Eli Roth to do all the reshoots and everything. But like I said, this led to Mazin stepping away entirely, and his name not even being included in the credits. There's a pseudonym on the credits called Joe Crombie, which in theory Craig Mazin has used before. It's been mentioned in relation to him a couple of times before. But Googling it and looking at some of the quotes that he said, he just full on denies that that's him at all. So he just doesn't want any association with this movie whatsoever, despite having a script attached to it 4 years ago. And I want to get to Cate Blanchett's casting as well, because the casting's been a big deal with this movie. But thoughts on... Because Craig Mazin's a fascinating dude anyway, going from like Scary Movie and The Hangover and all these like movies that weren't known for their scripts, let's say, to The Last of Us and Chernobyl. And it's like, it seemed like in the wake of that transition period is where he came in to try and do a Borderlands thing.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the Craig Mazin sort of career that guy's had is fascinating. Like you said, you know, a script doctor essentially on all of these movies that he's stated that he didn't really care for all of that much, but that was kind of his expertise. They were the only opportunities he was really given until we got Chernobyl, which was a huge hit. And then obviously he used the reputation and the leeway that he got from that show to go to HBO and pitch The Last of Us, which he had huge creative control over. So now he's kind of known as this modern television auteur, right? This guy who really has an eye for writing and complex themes and can deliver something hard-hitting. But obviously this script, if he was attached to it, which like you said he denies, we know he was attached to it, we don't know how much of his work was used necessarily, but this came I think after Chernobyl but before The Last of Us, so he hasn't really firmly established himself yet. So if I was him, I'd probably want to be getting away from it as well, especially if they've rewritten it extensively, which it seems like they have. Like, the idea of, I mean, you hear it from so many writers, of having their name attached to a script which looks nothing like their original work or the draft that they submitted because it's been changed so much, yet they have a credit just out of obligation, but they don't even really want it. Like, that happens over and over and over again. And this is a movie that you can tell has been hacked to pieces. Again, we talked about this in our review, but you can tell it's gone through so many different focus tests, so many different edits, probably different ratings in terms of how much they could get away with violence-wise. And the fact that this was shot in 2021 blows my brain. I couldn't believe that Cate Blanchett shot this movie before Tar was out, which she got huge acclaim for. And I know the person who plays Tiny Tina, she was in Barbie, but this was shot before Barbie, and a lot of stuff like that, where all of these actors were, and even the creators were, kind of at a different point in their career than they are in the world that Borderlands is coming out now. Like, time moves fast, and they've accomplished a lot within that time. So it's crazy that this relic is finally appearing, and all of them are, they're all having fun with it, of course. Like, this movie isn't going to tank any of their careers or anything like that, I don't think. Maybe Eli Roth's, but who knows? And they just seem to be like, yep, that is the thing I did at one time, and here it is, I guess.
This is a perfect segue into what Cate Blanchett has said about being in the movie. Because Cate Blanchett wasn't brought on until 2020, so there were all those different versions of the scripts between 2015 and 2020, but they didn't have ideas for who the cast was going to be. The insane cast that we have seemed to come from Craig Mazin's script. In 2020, even though there was all this furore around the idea of a Borderlands movie across most of the 2010s, because we do have Jamie Lee Curtis, Cate Blanchett, Kevin Hart as Roland in one of those miscast roles of all time. But what Cate Blanchett has said about being in Borderlands is the best part of this whole thing. Because she literally cites COVID madness as the reason for taking the role. She said, I was spending a lot of time in the garden, using the chainsaw a little too freely, and my husband said this film could save your life. Empire and Kotaku's write-up does note that Blanchett did play the games since wanting to get into the role. She loved all the cosplay and loved the community that's around Borderlands and the history of it. And she did enjoy herself filming the action scenes. But she said the only reason that she did it is because it was very left field, and it was she likes doing crazy roles.
Yeah.
So it was literally just for the banter at this point, wielding a chainsaw probably on one hand when she said yes to it. And I've just put in my notes during one of the weirdest times in modern human history. So if you cap it off with that, the miscasting, the production woes, the inability to nail down what the hell this thing even is, the living abomination that is the Borderlands movie, is backed up by its own history.
Yeah, totally. I mean, you mentioned Cate Blanchett there and why she took the role, which, I think we all went through a little bit of COVID madness right back in the day. I'd have probably signed up to the Borderlands movie as well. But as much as I love her, and I absolutely do love her, I think she's like literally one of the best actors working today. It's not like
the best thing about the movie.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely, easily. It's not like she's not gone for similar roles in the past. Like, of course, she's known for the likes of Tar more than she is for Borderlands. But I mean, she teamed up with Eli Roth on The House with the Clock on its Walls, a kind of family-friendly action-adventure blockbuster. She was in Thor: The Dark World, which, great movie, but it's still a big blockbuster where she's playing.
I do not remember her in Thor: The Dark World.
Villain. I'm definitely right about that, right? She played Hela. Not The Dark World, Thor Ragnarok, sorry.
Yeah.
That's why. Yeah. Hela and Thor Ragnarok. So she's done like these things before, and they have paid off in the past, but this is definitely, I think because it's a stinker, it kind of like looks like a bigger lapse of judgment. But I do think, even though, I don't know, everyone sort of feels miscast in a way, I do think she's like really good in it. I think she looks the part. She's great in the action sequences, and she does bring a sense of gravitas to this version of Lilith that could have felt so kind of flat. She at least like looks cool in it, and she gets something to do in the action sequences. But ultimately, I do think everyone in the movie is miscast, right down to Jack Black as Claptrap, who should have been a home run, but even they couldn't get that right for me.
I'm curious about how the rest of the fallout goes from this, because a lot of people queuing up to see it just because it is so bad at this point. It did have a 0% score on Rotten Tomatoes. It's now up to 4%. Due to one positive score that came in across the last few days. And maybe after the launch weekend, it'll be doing better. But at the minute, it's projected to make about a tenth of its overall budget. And that's not factoring in marketing as well. Because I think it costs between $120 and $140 million. And it's projected to make about $8 million or something. So we'll see. But this feels like a video game movie from a bygone era when industries and studios didn't know how the hell to make an adaptation of a video game. So we'll see what happens. But for now, the overall story of it is one hell of a fire.